Welcome everybody to our Beyond Awareness, Action and Prevention series in honor of Sexual Assault Awareness and Sexual Violence Prevention Months during April and May. If you missed any of our previous sessions on consent, boundaries, relationships, gender and sexuality, recognizing violence, or power and control, we highly recommend you check out the recordings on your YouTube page to get the most out of this series. And while we wait for people to maybe trickle in some more, feel free to message the webinar hosts and panelists directly with any tech issues. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat, or you can let us know where you're joining from, although we do want to make sure that privacy is maintained, so we will not read any names or locations out loud. And we do want to acknowledge that the content of the presentation may be activating for some. And so we're going to provide some self-care resources in the chat in case you need to step away at any time. You can also find the helpline numbers for Amelia Rising and the Sexual Assault Support Center of Sarnia Lambton in the resources we're about to put, but also you can find some helpline resources at the bottom of each slide. So somebody will be putting those in the chat right now. So who are we? My name's Natalie, and I am one of the Sexual Violence Prevention Education Coordinators at Amelia Rising, and joining me today is Trish, Erica Mullins, and Daniela, or Erica and Daniela, and I will let them introduce themselves if they wish. And at Amelia Rising, we offer tools to help people ages 12 and up have healthier and safer relationships. Amelia Rising offers free counseling for people who did not have their consent respected. And if you'd like more information on our services, you can find us on social media or visit our website. Feel free to also send us a DM to connect with one of us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Trish. I'm
Trish.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? I think there's a delay. Can you hear me?
I can hear
Trish,
you.
I'm not sure we can hear you.
So one of you can hear me. Uh-oh. Give me 1 second.
I did not realize that the music was still playing. My bad.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay. Awesome.
My bad.
That's okay. Just some technical difficulties in the beginning.
Yep.
My name's Trish. I'm the Public Education Coordinator at the Sexual Assault Center in Sarnia Lambton. At our agency, we offer prevention and awareness workshops around and education around sexual violence, consent, healthy relationships. As well, I am a counselor here too, and we provide individual and group counseling for anyone over the age of 16 who's experienced any form of unwanted sexual, anything of a sexual nature that was unwanted.
Okay. And with us, we do have my new partner, Daniela, who is also a sexual violence prevention education coordinator, and I'm really happy to have her here with us today to learn and see what's going on. So next, we just wanted to go through our land acknowledgement. Amelia Rising and North Bay rests on the traditional Anishinaabe territory of Nipissing and Doki's First Nations. The territory is covered by the Robinson, Huron, and Upper Canada treaties.
And Sexual Assault Center Sarnia Lambton rests on the traditional part of the ancestral land of Chippewa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples, and referred to collectively as the Anishinaabe.
Thanks, Trish. We are going to put a website in the chat and invite you to view what traditional lands and treaties you are currently on and what that means for you in the fight against sexual and gender-based violence. It's www.nativeland.ca. And we think this is important, especially talking about handling no and respecting each other's boundaries. We can't talk about that without acknowledging, how the boundaries and set by Indigenous people and how their no's have been continually disrespected for centuries. And, acknowledging that like the violence committed there is just like perpetuated even today is important. So we did just want to recognize that these conversations can have negative activators, and we would like to share a resource that offers free phone and chat counseling available 24/7 for Indigenous folks called Hope for Wellness. And another link by the Land Body Defense, if you have not had a chance to check this link out yet, to check out this website and view their incredible work, we definitely recommend that as well. Okay, so we're going to move on to workshop goals.
So today, talking about dealing with no, I am very excited about this conversation because it is difficult to handle someone saying no to you. So our goals today, we want to expand our understanding of rejection, respecting other people's boundaries, and learning how to handle just a simple no. We want to understand that rejection, it's not personal or limited to romantic relationships. And we want to increase our confidence with navigating feelings of rejection safely, because that can be quite difficult to do. So on our agenda today, we're going to start with being told no. We're going to look at, is this actually necessarily a rejection? We're going to look at rejection violence, reframing rejection and no's. We want to recognize harm, and we're going to go over an apology template. We're going to do a little bit of an activity, and then we're going to end as usual with a little bit of a grounding exercise.
Stretch. So being told no, it can be hard, and a lot of people often word it as being rejected, but being told no is a normal part of life. And it's not necessarily, sometimes it's someone just setting a boundary. And that's not, someone, rejecting the love and care that you want to give. It's just them being able, as we've discussed in previous sessions, being able to set up the boundaries that, make it able for them to be in relationship with you. But sometimes it is being rejected, and that also really sucks. And so, for example, some ways that people can be told no or be rejected in like everyday life can consist of someone not wanting Amelia made. And I have a TikTok here from Call Me Chris that I want to play, and this makes me laugh every single time. I really love it. It's a perfect example of a non-romantic relationship where somebody is, expressing like, I don't want this thing that you made. I don't want it.
All right, honey, here's your dinner. I don't want that. I want the dino nuggies. We don't have any dino nuggies. But why? We don't have any dino nuggies because when we went to the supermarket, I forgot because you were too busy having a tantrum on the floor in the candy aisle. I don't want that. You're gonna eat what's on your plate. No, thank you. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. Okay, you're gonna finish what's on your plate. Okay, and I will let you pick what movie we watched tonight. Oh, daytime we watched Frozen. Again? Fine.
So I love that. It always makes me laugh.
It's so cute.
Yeah. You can see her, you know, trying to push back, trying to convince, you know, her daughter to eat what's on her plate, but the daughter is very steadfast in her boundary that she really just doesn't want. She doesn't want that meal, and she'd rather have the dino nuggies. And then also, you know, the daughter wants to watch Frozen, and the mom knows I've got to, you know, if I want this, if I want, you know, what I've made to be respected, you know, maybe I'm going to have to bend a little and watch a movie that I don't really want to watch because I think she's seen it so many times.
A bit of a compromise has to happen there.
And so you may not get into the club, group, or extracurricular of your desire. And so this, you know, it may seem like an example for a lot of younger people, but I think also as adults, you know, if you're applying to be a part of a team or a board or like a, you know, professional association, you know, you may end up having to deal with not being accepted to those things as well. And that doesn't mean that you aren't, you know, you don't have anything to bring to the table or professionally that you don't know what's going on. It just means that there's other factors at play there. Or maybe, you know, like you're just not ready yet. And that is okay. Not everybody knows everything. Not everybody is doing things at the same speed as everyone else. You may lose a job or not get a job you really wanted. And with the job market these days, it is so competitive, and like applying online, it can be really discouraging to look and look and look, or to lose your job. But often I think that these things are not necessarily like about people or the skills that they have to bring. It's just like it may be the nature of what's happening at the workplace or the company, or just the hiring process altogether.
I think it's just so hard when, if you want something so bad, but some things are just out of your control.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to accept that. Yeah. And I really like the picture that's on here.
Yeah.
It's just like a cute little cartoon, but it just shows like the heaviness and the sadness and how that person is kind of internalizing what just happened.
Yes. You may fall out with a friend group, or feel excluded altogether. And again, this is something I think that a lot of people think of as, you know, an example for younger folks. But I mean, as adults, you know, it's hard to lose friendships or to grow apart from friends. And this is an area that I don't feel is particularly talked about enough. And, you know, feeling like falling out with a friend or like growing apart from a friend, like friends are important to have in life. And if you don't feel like you're accepted or have any of those, then that can be really tough. And so the last one is a person you are interested in may not be interested in you, or a relationship might end with someone really special to you. And I know this one can, you know, get a lot of us, and it's, you know, something that we may have all had to deal with at a certain point in our life. And that brings us to our first activity, where you can feel free to put any answers in the chat or anonymously in the Q&A box of, you know, examples of being told no, or thoughts, feelings, words that, you know, come to mind that we associate with being told no, from any of the examples or examples that were not shown. So feel free to do that. Anything that comes to mind? Give you a few seconds just to think on it.
I think there's a lot of emotion that goes along with being told no.
Mhm.
So as I was going through this, a lot came up for me myself. But I'll just wait and see if anyone has anything in the chat first.
Yeah. Same for me. Oh, we do have something. Oh, Daniela said feeling powerless. Yes, that is definitely something that folks can feel because, you know, often when you're being told no, there's not a lot that can be done about that. The power is kind of like the decision's out of your hands. The other person is saying no. So definitely do like that suggestion. I know that it can cause a lot of like, you know, people often feel like it's their fault because of them. So there's like feelings of failure. It can be scary.
When you say failure, something that came up to me is if, say you're working and you're trying to just be innovative and try to enhance programming or something, and you go to your higher up and you say, I have this great idea and you have this proposal, and they're like, yeah, it's great, but we just can't do it. And then you just feel like knocked down and you feel like, okay, so they said no, it's my idea, that's why they're saying no, when it could be anything. It could be funding, it could be similar programming at other places. But that feeling of failure, yeah, that really stood out to me.
So we had a suggestion of embarrassment. That's a really big one. Feeling embarrassed, I definitely agree with that. You know, because you're like, oh, you know, Erica, did you feel like saying more about that? Or you don't have to.
I feel like embarrassment also kind of ties into like the like pre-feeling of like when you're going to approach something that like you might be told no. Like it's kind of scary to maybe pitch that idea in the first place for a lot of people. So the idea that you could be rejected at the end of it is kind of something that like it's like a scary feeling of that failure. It kind of all is like interconnected as well.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And then that can also like snowball and lead into some insecurities.
And feelings of shame. So I know that, you know, Brene Brown's like, I don't know if it was her example first, but I know that it has come up for her. Oh, being told no sometimes feels like your idea or suggestion was silly or not good enough, which can make you feel ashamed. Yes, absolutely. And so like along that same idea is like Brene Brown says that like embarrassment is I did something bad, but shame or feeling ashamed is that I am bad. But I think sometimes like, you know, a lot of people, it can get really like mixed together. So yeah, I think that was great. Those are some good examples. So I'm going to move on to talking about, we're going to move on to talk about rejection violence, which is instances where someone reacts violently towards someone else who rejects, says no to, or declines their expressions of romantic or sexual interest. And I think that this is a problem or a phenomenon that is actually happening a lot in our society right now, but it doesn't really get the focus that it deserves. And I'm glad that like Daniela brought up that rejection can make people feel powerless. And, you know, that we talked about embarrassment and shame, because when you feel, you know, all those negative feelings, it can really feel destabilizing. And I think that one of the ways folks can often try to regain their power, regain stability. So if we're thinking back to last week's like power and control session, everybody wants to feel like they have power over their own life. Like they have power over the circumstances that are happening in their life. And I think when, folks are rejected, especially romantic or sexual, those feelings can lead folks to engage in behaviors that are actually quite violent. And this can happen, again, across all genders, all sexualities, but it seems to be particularly bad between men and women. And so this can look a lot like street harassment, stalking, or in Canada, that's called criminal harassment, intimate partner violence, verbal abuse, physical abuse, homicide. It can, show up in really small ways, or it can show up in, a lot of bigger ways. And so this is something that people have been studying over the last 10 to 20 years, at least to my knowledge. And I actually found a paper that's cited here at the bottom, where somebody really looked at the ways that this shows up in life, or in our society right now. Trish, do you have any thoughts?
I just think it's really important that this is in here. It's not, rejection violence isn't really a title people use like frequently in everyday language. And I think it's important to really cover when we look at, again, like we had talked about the cycle of violence and abuse, and then you look at like physical abuse, verbal abuse, even all the way down to homicide. It just really reiterates how important this conversation is.
Exactly. And I think this happens, a lot in dating and dating violence. Or even just, there used to be a TikTok I showed with this presentation where, like a woman was being harassed on the street because a guy, like catcalled her, and she did not respond to that, by being like complimented. She, was like, I don't want to talk to you. And so the man quickly changed his tune and was following her down the street, hurling obscenities at her. And I think also, this happens like in bars where, a man will hit on a woman and she will not be interested. And then that very quickly, turns into, oh, well, you weren't beautiful anyway, or like you were ugly anyway, or like, it's just like it very quickly snaps into this place of trying to take down the person you were just trying to, take home, or something like that. But there's also things like Julie Lalonde's story. And if you haven't heard of Julie Lalonde, I highly suggest you checking her out. She has a project called Outside of the Shadows. And she, her story is that she ended a relationship with a previous boyfriend, and this person proceeded to stalk her for 11 years. And the only reason that he stalked is because he actually passed away somehow. So when we talk about like people trying to leave abusive relationships and it actually being the most dangerous time for them, I think that this is something that also plays a key component in that as well.
Yeah, when you look at Julie's story, like I just think, how unsafe and how scared would you feel every day? Like just knowing somebody is retaliating and stalking you, all because of rejection, right? So that person has felt loss of control, so they're trying to regain that.
So, that might sound like what do we do? Like, what do we do about this? It's so complex. It cannot be solved overnight. And there isn't just one solution. It took a long time for this issue to develop, and it's going to take a long time with many different solutions, education being one of them, to undo this creation of like rejection violence, to undo this culture where like rejection is seen as like the most terrible thing that can be done to somebody. And in my opinion, one of the hardest parts of solving any social issue is changing social attitudes. And so one of the things we can do that can influence our society, culture, and attitudes is to begin to reframe how we think about rejection. And so if we can do this, we can work towards healthier ways of coping with rejection that we can not only use ourselves, but begin to pass on to younger generations to hopefully break that cycle. And so I really love this image that says, learn to see rejection as redirection. And so I have this question here that's really just for reflection, but folks can put, answers in the chat if they wish. How can we foster a culture that handles rejection and respects others' boundaries in a healthy way? And if you're like, I don't know the answer to that, that's why I'm here at this workshop. Don't worry, we are going to look at this in the coming slides. But I think like even just naming it as an issue, even just paying attention to it as an issue and being aware of it is the first step to how we do. And so Trish will go over some tips.
Tips for just reframing the rejection. Positive self-talk is key. If you think about the power of negative self-talk and how it can knock us down so quickly and discourage us, I challenge everyone to try every time they have a negative thought about themselves or something that's happening, try to reframe it and try to do a little bit of self-talk at this, or positive self-talk at the same time. We want to remember rejection is normal, and it will happen in all areas of life. It's inevitable, right? We have to understand how to not personalize that and how to not internalize it like it's your fault, because it may not be about you. It could be completely about the other person that's saying no. But even if it is about you, it doesn't mean no one will ever love you or that you're not valuable. Just try to remember that this is not the way it will always be. Things are going to progress, things are going to change. Time and space away, and respond, not react. So when process, okay, sorry, now I'm stammering on that. Process your pain. That's a big thing too. So I think we mentioned earlier when we talk about rejection, we often just say like, okay, well, we'll just get over it and kind of shove that down. But you have to acknowledge what you're going through and process the emotions, because we talked about like you could feel mad, you could feel insecure, you could feel scared, confused. Those are heavy, those are big emotions and they're real. So it does benefit you when you have a rejection to say, okay, I'm going to sit with this and I'm going to process how am I feeling and what is, how can I name that and process it?
Mm-hmm.
And with that, you're finding ways to cope that are productive. And that could be, seeking supports from friends. It could be really diving into your hobbies and doing things that you enjoy and that make you feel good. It could be therapy, going to see a counselor once in a while, a distress center or mental health line. That is always helpful as well. There are barriers to seeking support. And then we look at like men and boys and the stigma around that and being able to reach out or feel safe to express emotion in a healthy dialogue. So now we could go into talking about maybe some toxic masculinity and how that's kind of silencing men and boys more so than other genders. Natalie, did you have anything to add on to that?
Yeah, so I think, you know, this last one is really more like how we as a community, not just women, but everyone, men included, can be there for, you know, younger folks, especially younger boys, and be a support and a safe space for them, because yes, like there is a stigma for boys to boys and young men to come forward about being rejected, because part of toxic masculinity is having this like prowess, um, dating prowess, sexual prowess, and getting rejected is, you know, seen as kind of a hit to that masculinity. Um, there's a speaker named Jackson Katz who actually talks a lot about this, and his videos are really good. I would definitely look for one of his TED Talks on YouTube. And I think, like, you know, it goes back to that embarrassment and that shame and feeling like your, you know, entire gender is like dependent on being able to not be rejected. And so when, you know, when men and boys experience this very natural, normal part of life, it's like, who do they go to? Who do they talk to? Hopefully, you know, if things keep changing and evolving, you know, there'll be a way for like men to be there for other men. But really just being able to reach out and feel safe expressing your emotions and having a healthy dialogue with someone is something that, you know, we all need. And so being there for each other when we're feeling those tough feelings of rejection is really important.
Yeah, not minimizing that, right? Yeah.
And I think, you know, also for like single folks or, you know, not just single folks, but, you know, there's a lot of like romantic and sexual rejection that comes for that too. And I'm not sure you know, people are like, oh, just move on. Like it's a normal part of life. But like you said, those are very real feelings that people are feeling. You know, somebody has written a whole book on like how painful it can be for people. There's lots of books out there on how painful that can be for people. And so I think it's just like really knowing how to hold space for someone that is going through these difficult emotions, so that they do feel like they're not alone is really important.
Mm-hmm.
So we will look at responding to a no.
Yeah, so now that we know being told no or being rejected isn't inherently bad, we can use this as a learning opportunity to respect a boundary someone has set. We all want to have our boundaries respected by others, so we need to respect other people's. So how can we begin to safely respond to a no moving forward? We are going to go over 4 steps here. And these are from author and Dr. Faith G. Harper. And there's 4 tips we can use to how to handle a no. Number 1, pay attention to your feelings with self-compassion. It's so important to be kind to yourself. It's easy to have those negative self-talks and those negative messages coming at you, but really take a moment and just give yourself the kindness you would give to another person. Put a no in its proper place is tip number 2. While you're having self-compassion and engaging in the positive self-talk, put no in its place by just remembering that no is generally the rejection of your offer, not your personhood. So this meaning, try not to place the no onto you personally. So recognizing again that sometimes no's come because someone has to set those boundaries, because someone has other priorities or other things on the go that it's just not aligning with what you're requesting. Tip number 3, recognize the boundary you hit and learn from it. Excuse me. reflect back onto the 6 boundary types we previously discussed, recognize the boundary that's been hit, and use this as redirection for moving forward. I know, like, we could probably have a whole presentation like just on boundaries. Like, it's very important to be setting those, recognizing them, and not feeling guilty for setting them. A lot of times I'll say, I need to set boundaries socially, I need to set boundaries at work, but then when it comes down to it, I feel guilt for doing it.
Yes, and we did in our boundaries presentation talk about, the different kinds of boundaries and like how to set and establish a boundary, and how it's not always easy. Like, it's, everyone's like, just set boundaries, like it's the easiest thing in the world, but actually, like, it's not. So it's a little bit of empathy almost. It's like, if you flip it, if you had set a boundary and someone sort of like bumped up against that, you would want to let them know, but you wouldn't want them to feel like terrible about it, unless it was like a really egregious, boundary violation. So yeah, it's, I'll let you continue. Just want to say that.
Yeah, I just know that, like, me personally, I know where my boundaries are a little bit weaker than not. And it's because I typically am a people pleaser. So I want to include everyone in everything. I want everyone to be happy, but you can't do it all, right? You can't include everyone in everything. And I struggle with that. So I'm personally working on that boundary right now. Lastly, we want to communicate this understanding. We know being told no, it sucks. But it's important to understand that the other person is asserting their boundary and we need to respect it. A response might sound like, I'm bummed, but I get it. And there's no hard feelings. So again, flipping that, like Natalie had said, like looking at how is that other person feeling and why are they setting a boundary? And let's recognize it's probably not easy for them to set that boundary. So we can be honest and say, yeah, that disappoints me, but I totally understand this is what you need to do. And just being open to seeing the other side of it.
Exactly. And we talk a lot about Faith G. Harper's work in previous presentations, but her book, How to Unf Your Boundaries. I can't say the actual title. I would probably get in trouble from my boss and YouTube later on, and folks watching right now and in our audience. But her book really is so good, and it's why we have referenced her so much, because like everybody's saying, oh, okay, like how do we redirection, like how do we see rejection as redirection, how do we do this, like what are the steps? And it's just like, I think these steps are really important. They're good like self-reflection steps. And so while we are trying to respond and not react, these are just a few like easy things we can maybe call to mind in a situation, but there are also things that we can pass on to other people, especially like younger people, who may need to be hearing these things. And I love how she emphasizes that it is a rejection of your offer, not your personhood. I feel like that's a really important distinction. It is not you as a person, it is just what you're offering, which still feels bad, but it's like it's not you as a human being that they are rejecting. Daniela or Erica, do you have any thoughts you'd like? Not, we can.
I just have one thing. I think that, like, as somebody I've read Dr. Faith G. Harper's work, I think that the material that we've pulled from the workbook this week is some of the most important aspects of the book for sure. But if somebody was looking to kind of expand their knowledge a bit, I would definitely recommend reading the rest of the Unf Your Boundaries workbook. because although like we do pull the critical information and like the resources, it is a really great resource for not only boundaries, but for the rejection and a lot of great things.
Yes. And so, you know, like folks may be thinking right now, like, what do I do? Like, if I'm realizing right now that I have harmed somebody, that I have not respected people's boundaries, that I didn't accept their no, like, I'm feeling really bad. What do I do? And so we just want to say, first, be kind to yourself. You know, it's possible that you didn't realize that you caused somebody harm in the past. And, you know, like you made a mistake and you can learn from it. So don't be too hard on yourself. You know, you do the best you can until you do better. And then once you know better, you can do better. Our previous coordinator, Kylie, loved that quote. But it's also a really good quote. And it's just like, just remember where you were at in your learning. So we did want to go over, you know, like how to apologize if you feel that, you know, sometimes you do want to make amends. Sometimes amends are not always appropriate if they stem from us wanting to just make us feel better more than truly reflecting on the harm caused. And amends may also cause more harm if it will re-traumatize the person we're apologizing to. And if this is the case, we highly just like recommend, you know, doing some more internal work, like reading the book. But for now, we do have this apology template that we can look for to see, you know, how apologizing may be possible. And it also includes, you know, what an apology is not. It does reflect the apology template that is in the Unf Your Boundaries book on page 86 of her workbook. Trish, do you have anything?
This was when I saw this, I was really excited about this slide. I can tell you, I didn't learn this growing up. I wasn't told how to make a proper apology, and I wasn't told that those things at the bottom actually are not apologies. So saying, I'm sorry, but you made me mad, that's not owning it, right? So I think when we're looking at how to do a real apology, we have to recognize, okay, I have to own something that I did, and it's pretty much that simple. Like you have to accept that, like say what you're sorry for. So I'm sorry for offending you. You can even say it was not my intention, but I know that impacted you and I'm so sorry. Something like that.
Yeah. And I think, you know, like accepting rejection and, you know, learning how to give learning how to give, you know, an actual apology are two things that like are not taught. At least, you know, for me, they weren't taught to me. And you said that like they weren't taught to you. And I think that it's actually like a really important intersection to learn because so many of us go through life like not knowing these things. And so I think it's really important for growth and, you know, to change a culture of violence. It seems like a really small step, but sometimes small steps are the best.
I think what stood out to me is like how many times someone has said to me, and it really gets me, is in the not apology section, oh, I'm sorry that you feel that way. It leaves you left to feel like, okay, so this is my fault. I'm interpreting this wrong, when we all have our own perspective of things, right? And it's ultimately maybe someone's actions that created you to feel that way, and they need to, again, just own it.
Yeah. And so I did just want to say that, you know, I know that I am guilty of having said these things that are not apologies.
Oh, yeah.
And so I don't want folks, if you're sitting there thinking, oh no, like I have done this. It's okay. We have all done it. And like I know that I may, despite knowing better, I may do this again in the future because now it's like a habit that has been created. And like, it's fine. We're all going to mess up. It's just like recognizing when we've messed up and, trying to like recorrect and remember how to like remember what we learned. So be gentle with yourself. It is something that, takes practice. It's something that will, may take a while to like reprogram like old ways of doing things. It's something that I'm still practicing and learning how to do better at. So, I think this is a really sensitive area because like realizing you caused harm, like that's a scary thing. And then also realizing like that you do want to make it better, like is it appropriate to make it better? And then like not knowing how and practicing how. It's a really, it's a tough journey. So be gentle with yourself is all I want to say.
That image with the 7 steps, I like would print that out and put it on my fridge. Like I love it.
Yeah. Okay, so now we can go on to the test your knowledge quiz. You can scan this QR code, or we can put the link to the Slido directly into the chat so you can click it. And it should just take you directly there. And Daniela will be the one taking us through this activity. Just going to put this up right here. You see we have one person joined. 2 people, it's exciting. Three people, this should be fun. Okay, so Daniela.
Let's get started. Okay, so the first question is a true or false question, and it is asking, is it okay to feel powerless and or out of control when you have been rejected? 15 seconds left. Perfect. So true was the correct answer. As we went over in the presentation, it is okay to feel powerless and out of control. That's something that we have been taught in our societies, that we do want to have a lot of power and control in our lives. So when we have been rejected or told no, that is something that a feeling that comes up, and it's completely normal. We just have to learn how to redirect that.
And so most people got that answer right.
So the second question is another true or false question, and it's asking if rejection and violence can occur regardless of gender, sexuality, and or relationship status. So everybody answered true, which was correct. As we went over earlier, while we have seen disproportionately high rates of rejection violence occurring against women, that doesn't mean that it cannot happen regardless of gender. And then also, we said that it can happen outside of just relationships. It can happen in the workplace. It can happen in friend groups. And as we, I believe, mentioned earlier, it isn't just people that you're in a relationship with. It can be somebody on the street catcalling you, or it can be an intimate partner. But that was good answers, and everybody got that one right as well. So the next question asks, which of the following is not a strategy to reframe rejection? So we have taking time and space away to reflect, understanding the rejection as personal failure, finding productive ways to cope, so through therapy, counseling, finding hobbies, and then the final option is engaging in self-talk. So everybody answered that that was understanding rejection as personal failure, which is correct. That's one thing that we reiterated, is that it is not about your personal self always. Like, it could be a rejection of the offer, and that doesn't mean that it's always like a personal rejection. So we'll move on to question 4 that asks, when we recognize that a harm has been, or that a boundary has been crossed, what can we do to repair that harm? So can we learn from the mistake? Can we seek support from a professional? Can we work on our internal self? Or can we make amends? Or would that be all of the options that I've just gone over? So it looks like everybody answered all of the above, which is correct. We just went over this in our apology slide, and in the previous rejection violence slides. It's very important that if it's appropriate that we do try to make amends. And then again, working on internal self. So whether that be through positive self-talk, or even learning how to, I guess, relearning how to apologize. So using that 7-step framework, as opposed to using the examples that we use on the bottom. So for question 5, we are looking at which of the apology strategies is not an appropriate response to make amends. So we have, it was wrong because, how can I make this better? I'm sorry that you feel that way, or moving forward, I promise to. So everybody answered that I'm sorry that you feel that way, which is the correct answer, as was in the graphic. The rest of these are all part of that 7-step action to learn to apologize. And the I'm sorry you feel that way is a negative way to make amends. That I know I'm guilty of saying that in the past as well. It's something that we've learned. It's something that we've heard from others. So now that we know that that's not an appropriate response to make amends. And then for the last question, we are asking which of the following is not an example of positive self-talk. So the first option is, it may not be about me personally. This doesn't mean that no one will ever love me. Rejection is normal and doesn't measure my life's value. And then the final option is, I didn't think that they deserved me anyways. So it looks like everybody chose the I didn't think they deserved me anyways, which is the correct answer for today's Slido. This is something that is a redirection of the rejection violence, but not a positive redirection. That is going to blame the person that rejected you, which is a tactic that we know is not an appropriate response for sure. And then that is the end of the quiz, which It looks like I think everybody answered every question correctly.
Oh, looks like Daisy won. Again, there's no like prize for that. You just get to say that you were the fastest or that you got the most right. Thanks for everyone who participated in that quiz, and thank you to Danielle for taking us through that. And that brings us to our grounding activity, which will be done by Trish.
Thank you. Okay, so I really like how we end with these grounding activities because the content can, like we said at the beginning, be pretty heavy. So I think we should ground ourselves to the here and now. So I invite you to focus on everything yellow that is around you. And then when you think about, is there anything yellow you didn't notice before this exercise? And then just take a moment and recognize how many yellow things you can find around you. And hopefully that helped bring everybody to the here and now and back grounded. I know personally, I did not recognize how many yellow things I had around me, but there's quite a few.
I wasn't sure that I was going to be wearing yellow today, but there's actually yellow in my jacket. And there's quite a few yellow things that I can see like in front of me on my desk. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the presentation. And as always, you can feel free to ask any questions or present any thoughts that you may have. We like to provide that kind of time. And otherwise, our information, our contact information, and the link to the survey and certificate has been put in the chat. And we are going to hang out here in case anybody does have a question, and I will put the music back on.
Thank you everyone for coming today.